these are usually the things that we need to do a web test and an internal, right? Like there's a, vulnerability scanning portion, which we have our own tool for this, and that needs to be installed. We have Burp Suite, which is for manual web pen testing, all these other things, Nmap for port scanning. And he's like, yeah, like it's going to take months for us to get those tools to go through whitelisting. And it's like, okay, well, that's unfortunate. I'm like, well, I can just like, is it a problem of policy? Is it a problem that you just don't think we're going to be able to get them on the laptop? And he's like, and he tongue in cheek, he's like, hey, if you can get them on the laptop, you can use it, but you're not going to be able to get them on the laptop. And so I pull out my USB key and I boot from, a bootable Kali Linux distro off my USB key, and I root the machine, disable the host-based intrusion prevention software, and then start installing my tools as my new user account on root, basically. And then once I have root bootable Linux distro, I can go into the file system, change the stuff in the Windows file system so that I have an account that's administrator access to install the Windows tools there too. And after that, Sasha didn't give us any shit. He was like, okay, these guys are legit. They know what they're doing, but these are the types of things that you can't crumble under. And there's a lot of stress that goes on in this situation, especially when they're the client and you're the person coming into their organization and stuff like that. And so, I don't know if you get that anymore. So yeah.
No, not that much anymore. Did you ever run into a situation where like, you did a pen test and then you're getting arrested or going through that whole thing? Like you always hear about these like horror stories where like
So
the CTO forgets that he signed something 2 months ago, or whatever.
yeah. I didn't ever have any trouble with the law. So I did a bunch of red teaming, which included physicals at my first gig. And that was mostly for banks. And they would put me on the grunt work stuff, but I never got arrested for any of it. So a lot of what I did was crawl space, climbing when I was more fit, and dumpster diving behind banks and pulling out trash. I was the guy that, I was the low man on the totem pole at that point at my first job. And so, it didn't matter if it was sunshine or raining, I'm diving through that dumpster. And then our big one back then was most banks had shred bins. And so we had shred bin company shirts, and we would go in and just walk out with the shred bin if they didn't have it chained to something. And so we would just go steal the shred bin and put it in the back of our car or whatever, or a truck or whatever we were using. And so those are the closest like kind of like red teamy things I got early in my career. And then later on, when I did more red teaming later, our services didn't include physical time, right? I mean, the closest we got there was USB key drops. So, using duckies and stuff like that look like USB keys, but are actually HID devices, putting shells on them and then delivering them through the parking lot, like dropping them in the parking lot of the organization and stuff like that. But, I did a whole bunch of physical, I had a couple of falls through ceilings, and I gave up